It's 7 o'clock by my clock, and so hopefully you are seeing the slate screen that says, "Welcome to the Boise Camera Club Thursday night live show," and you're hearing my voice. Somebody give me some feedback and let me know if it's all working out okay. I'll just keep talking here in the meantime. What we're going to do is get into a little bit of Lightroom editing. This will probably be pretty basic for most of you, and maybe not. You know, when you watch somebody else edit, you always see something that they do different than you do it. So hopefully you will see that too. I will go ahead and do some things, and then when you've watched it for a little bit, go ahead and while you're watching it, if you have questions, post them. But I won't be able to probably edit and read your questions at the same time, especially due to the delay. So what I plan to do is show a few things, and then I will go ahead and look over and see what questions you have and respond to the questions. Harold's having a problem here, and I can't quite help him. So the fact that some of you have figured it out, I figure that it's working. We'll help the most people we can. Giuseppe says, "I hear you." Giuseppe, good to see you. I will try not to mangle your name, but Giuseppe, I think that's how you say it. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the desktop, and I got to do a few things. And in a moment, 30-second delay, of course, as I said, you should see Lightroom. So somebody raise their hand or shoot me a message when you see the Lightroom screen. What you're going to see is we will be in the library module for starters. And what I've done here is I picked a few images that we can edit. And as these exist on the screen right now, these are versions that I've already edited. So you're going to see the after first, and then you're going to see the before, and then I'm going to kind of show you how I got there. So hopefully that will work. I see a couple people. Greg says, "I hear you." Patty says, "I see it. Looks good." I trust you're seeing the True Light Photographics Lightroom screen. Mega Mark says, "I see my child." Yeah, Mark is my son, and that little guy in the orange cap up in the corner is my grandson. So we're going to also edit that one so you can see portrait editing. So that's good. Anyway, from the feedback I'm seeing on the screen, looks like you're getting it. So that's a good thing. So let's go ahead and get into this and see how it goes. As I said, I'm in the library module. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and click the picture of the barn first. That's the one we're going to start on. It is actually a pretty quick and easy edit, and you will see a pretty remarkable change from the before and after, and how easy it really is to get there. So I'm going to switch over to the develop module, and this is a barn that was up in Round Valley that Dan Motaz and I were up shooting last winter. Haven't been up there this winter, but this was taken then. So what you see on the screen now is actually the after. And I'm going to hold down the backslash key, and what that'll do is show me the before. So holding it down, that's the image as it came directly out of the camera. So how did we get there? So let's take a look. What I'm going to do is I'll let the backslash key go. It'll go back to the after. And then I'm going to come down here in the corner, see my cursor here. You should be able to see my cursor. And I'm going to hit reset. And what that's going to do is set it back to the before. So we'll hit reset. So that's the way it came directly out of the camera. So what do we do to get there? Okay. You'll notice in the develop module all the different things you can do. And what I've got is, oops, hello, lost my screen there. Sorry about that. Anyway, these are lined out in the order that you might use them. And in the new versions of Lightroom, you're actually able to change the order that these are in. And that's a nice thing because not all of us work in the same workflow that other people do. So these are arranged in the order that I work in, and it may not be the order that you work in, but just know that you can drag these around, pick one up and drag it to another place. I'm not going to do that now and tempt fate and mess it up, but you can. So I usually start out in lens corrections, this top one. And if I go ahead and open that up, what you're going to see is a couple of check boxes. One says remove chromatic aberration. I won't spend a lot of time talking about what that is, but suffice it to say, it's that kind of magenta or green fringing you sometimes see around the edges of objects. I never find many reasons to not use that, so I almost always check that. The second one down says enable profile corrections, and what you're going to see when I click on that is you're going to see that Lightroom is able to look at the EXIF data in the file and know what lens was used when this was shot. So if I click that, now it comes on and it says you shot this with a Canon. The lens you used was the Canon EF 70-200, and it has a profile for that. And what it means by a profile is it looks up and takes into account maybe distortions, vignetting, things that that particular lens has, and makes corrections for it. So let's toggle that off and on so you can see the difference. It's on now, it's off there. It's just a tiny little change, but if you watch carefully, you'll see when I click this back on, a very slight change. And what it's done is it's corrected for that particular lens. So I always go into these two things in lens correction and do them. I never see a reason not to. There might be one, in which case you wouldn't have to use it, but I always do. Moving right along is the Basics tab, and this is where you're going to do a lot of your work, probably 80% of it, I would say. So let's open the Basics tab, and we've got a bunch of different things here, and I'll speak to them as we use them. First of all, something that I've learned to do is come down here and it says auto. And I know, photographers, especially as we get more skilled, tend to dismiss auto, say, I can do a better job than auto. But why not? Give it a try and click it on and see what it does for you. See if you like it, and it makes an effect. So let's go ahead and click the auto button and see what it suggests as changes for this photo. Okay, it lightened up the dark areas of the barn, it darkened up the clouds. It's not all the way there, but if you look down, what it's done in auto is it started to adjust the sliders based on what it thinks are the proper settings for those things. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you what basically is my workflow. And I do this almost for every single picture. It was kind of a technique I learned from watching Serge Ramelli. And this is how he does it. And I like it pretty well. There's always tweaks to be made and so forth, but this is kind of how I work. So I come to exposure. I look at my histogram and kind of see where it is for starters. This looks like it's pretty evenly spread. And you'll notice, of course, with all this white snow, the histogram is bunched up over towards this side, and that's what you would expect for a photograph like this. So let's go ahead and bring the exposure up just a taste, and that probably has pushed it a little far up here, but you'll see we can always go back and retweak later. Okay, I'm going to come down to shadows. And what I typically do is open up the shadows all the way. And you'll notice when I do that, it really has lightened up the dark areas of the barn. So then I'm going to take my set my whites and blacks. what I do is I hold down the Alt key. And you'll notice when I do that, and I click whites, the whole screen goes black. And what I'm going to do is raise the whites to the right until I just start seeing some areas. And what those areas are showing is where it is now totally white. Those areas are 100% white. There is no detail there. Usually you do not want to blow out your highlights. So now I'm still holding down the Alt key. As I drag this back to the other direction, those will start to disappear. And when I might just see a few little specks, that's good. I've set my white point. Now I'm going to do the same with the blacks. I'm going to click right here, hold down the key, drag the blacks till I start seeing a few blacks. Usually I will take that a little bit further, because those areas are 100% black, and when I let that go, what you're going to do is see that those are the dark areas in the windows of that barn where you would expect it to be totally dark. So let's go ahead and let that go. All right, so we've set our white point, we've set our black point. Okay, I'm going to come back, and I still now think that this is probably a little overexposed based on the histogram and also based on what I see. So now I'm going to come back and bring the exposure down just a taste. Okay, so we've done that. So let's move down to the next section, down here in presence. Texture is exactly what it would sound like. It is going to put texture into areas where there is higher contrast and so forth, like here in the barn. And I think that would be good in this shot. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit. Doing this type of thing is sort of like cooking. If you taste the dish and you say, you know, I think it needs a little salt, you might put a little in. More is not always better. If I bring texture all the way up, now the barn starts looking kind of grungy. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give it a little bit, and I can always go back and retweak it later. Clarity is going to work a little bit with the local contrast. And again, I'm going to bring it up just a little bit. Clarity is easily overdone. If I bring that up all the way, that looks terrible. So, you know, again, do it by eye. The more you edit, the more practice you will get. Dehaze. Dehaze kind of takes out the fog and the low contrast and so forth in areas. This picture doesn't scream to me that it has a lot of that, but let's play with the dehaze slider back and forth so you can see. Okay, I don't like that. I'm going to bring it back this way. Now, if I go to reverse dehaze, it actually adds haze. So you can see what's happening. That's the extreme if I go the other way. I tend to use dehaze, of course, on images that have some haze and I want to get rid of it. As you'll see later, when I get into the brush, sometimes dehaze is nice used locally. And I have been able to go in with a brush and using reverse dehaze actually create what looks like kind of a fog effect, and that's kind of nice. Okay, let's move down to the next slider, vibrance. And we'll talk about vibrance and saturation together. Vibrance, what it does is it brings up the saturation in areas that are not already oversaturated. So if there are areas that are undersaturated, if I bring up vibrance, notice when I bring it up a lot, what it's doing to that blue sky. It's not affecting the snow much, or the barn maybe a little bit, but so forth. But I'm going to bring it down a little bit. For this particular shot, I don't want too much. Down here in the saturation slider, remember this, saturation is kind of a hammer, and use it very sparingly, because what it does is it takes no regard to what may already be saturated or so forth. It saturates everything equally, or in reverse, it desaturates everything equally. So let's yank it back and forth and you can see what I'm talking about. If I bring it way up, you know, that's too saturated. That it just doesn't look well. If I bring it down all the way, you're going to have a monochrome image, because no saturation is monochrome. So let's put it back. I don't use saturation very often. Now, while I'm on this topic, let me show you one more thing I just did. Say I bring up a slider where I want, and I say I don't really want that. I want to set that back to 0. Well, I can drag this back to the 0 point, or I can double click on the little slider and it goes back to 0. So there's that. So now I look at the picture some more, that we've been through all those things, and I say, what else do I think it needs? Where could it need some help? I still think maybe the face of the barn is a little dark. So we'll work on that. A couple other things to talk about real quickly. And I'm just hoping that we're still broadcasting live out there. Looks like we have about 38 viewers, if that's correct. And so I'm real happy about that. Somebody shoot me a message in the live chat real quickly and just say, hey, yep, you're still coming at me and it's working. So go ahead and do that right now, if you would, and I'll keep on working. Let's go back up to the histogram, and you'll notice these two little pointers right here. This one here and this one here. Okay, and when I hover it, this one says show shadow clipping. Well, what that's saying is those areas that are now showing as blue are 100% black. There is no detail there. Sometimes I might care about that, and I want to have detail there, so I'd have to make some adjustments accordingly. Sheila says we're still live, so thank you, Sheila. That's perfect. I appreciate that. The areas that are totally black in this image, let me take this off the clipping slider. I would expect to be black. I mean, this is the interior of the barn. I'm not going to pull out much detail there, and so I'm okay with that. Let's come over to the other clipping slider. Okay, that's highlight clipping. Now, let's yank this up a little bit. Fortunately, right now, there are no highlights being clipped, because if there were, they would show up red. So let's purposely bring the exposure up a little too much. And now, still not there. Let's bring it up a whole lot much. Okay, notice down there at the bottom of the screen, if you look very carefully, there are some red specks. And those red specks are 100% white, no detail. Let's yank the exposure up a lot. Obviously, you would never make your picture look like this, but for the purposes of demonstration, you can see what I'm talking about. Now, if I hover the highlight clipping slider, you see those things are red. And that says those are now 100% white, no detail. So let's put the image back where we think it looks about right. Okay, so we've gone through all these things in the basic section. And those are what are called global adjustments. And what that means is when you make those adjustments, you are affecting the entire picture, not just a certain location. But what if I want to work on certain points in the picture? Then you use some of these other tools, and we're going to talk about them right now and use them and let you see how they work. The first one over here, and rather than work from this direction, well, okay, we'll work from this direction, go the other. Well, I'll probably jump around based on what I see. First of all, let's go to this first one. If I hover it, it says it's the crop overlay. So if I click it, now it brings up a grid and a crop window. So let's talk about cropping a little bit. And I see something I want to crop out, so that's probably a good time to talk about it. If I come down over here and I click where it says original, you will now see some various aspect ratios. If you are making an image, and particularly if you want to print it to a certain size, you will want to make your image the proper aspect ratio. So a lot of times we might print an 8x10 or a 4x6 or a 13x19 or whatever else we might want to crop to. 4x6 is typically the same aspect ratio that will come out of your camera. So if I particularly leave it on original, or I come down to 4:6, you're going to notice it doesn't change, because that is the native aspect ratio, at least of most digital cameras, not all, but most. So let's go ahead and leave it there. Now, if I grab a corner and I begin to pull it, you'll notice as it changes the crop, it's maintaining the relative width and height at the same time, so that it, regardless of whether I crop it here or I crop it here, it is still a 4:6 aspect ratio. Now, let's use this particular, well, let's go to two more things so you can see it. Let's go back here. Say I didn't want a 4:6 aspect ratio. I wanted to make an 8:10 of this. So if I click here, 8:10, notice how much more squarish it becomes, because a 8:10, or basically a 4:5 aspect ratio, is more square. Something to think about is, say this particular picture, instead of being a barn, was a group of people. And you shot the group of people and you cropped pretty tightly in the camera. And then somebody said, can you make me an 8:10 of that particular picture? Well, here might be the problem. If you had people going all the way from this side of the picture to this side of the picture, and now they asked for an 8:10, Uncle Charlie over here is going to be cropped out, and Cousin Sue over here is going to be cropped out. So, word to the wise, if you're shooting group shots of people or anything else that you might want to be a little flexible later, you're not sure what aspect ratio you're going to use, shoot a little loose. You can always crop a picture. You cannot uncrop a picture, at least not very easily. There are some tricks, but so forth. Let's come back here and come back to our 4:6 aspect ratio. And now what I want to do is crop this thing. Now, in addition to cropping, I can also move the crop. And what I'm doing is I'm holding down my left mouse button and dragging around. So now I can move this to how I want it in the crop. And I noticed over here a little red bush over here, and I don't think it's doing anything for me. So I am going to crop it out. I'd like to kind of keep this red barn back here, so let's size this up a little this way and drag it over this way a little bit, and I think I like that crop. So I'm going to say done. And now the picture is recropped. Let's talk about something else that's on crop, and that's leveling a picture. This picture looks pretty level, but if it wasn't, here are some ways I could change it. When I click the crop tool, I can come up to a corner and notice my cursor, rather than being a pointer or here a hand, turns into a double-headed arrow. If I hold the mouse button down and drag up and down, I can tilt the picture and level it. That's one way to level a picture. So we're going to let go, and we're going to say done, and so forth. Another way is if you come to the crop tool and you come down here to this little ruler that says angle, you can, oops, we lost it here. Hang on. Okay, back there. Occasionally a message pops up from somebody, and then when I make it go away, it also makes my Lightroom screen go away. Anyway, there's a couple ways we can level using this tool. One is to use the slider, and I can run the slider back and forth and tilt the picture and level it that way. I find an easier way is to come over to this little ruler and click it. And now what it does is it says anything that I run that ruler along the edge of, that becomes the level. So say the horizon looks like it's about here, and I run the level across here. Now it levels to that. I'm going to hit undo, which is, you can hit Control-Z, is always undo for Lightroom and most other Windows functions. And now let's try it on the vertical. Say I decided I wanted this edge of the barn to be perfectly vertical. I can click the ruler tool, run my line down this way. Now it says make that vertical. Well, it may be vertical, but it doesn't look right for my picture. So I'm going to come back up here and just drag it this way and make it look like what I think it should look. And now I noticed with all that playing around that I cropped off this little post here. And I kind of like the little post there as an anchor. So I'm going to readjust and I'm going to say, yeah, okay, I like that. That looks good. So we're done. Let's see, where else do we want to go here? The other tools. All right. Let's go ahead and look at this tool. This is called spot removal. And if you have something that you want to take out, a spot primarily, although you can do other things with it, this is the tool you use. So let's go ahead and click on it. And now one of the things we might want to talk about while we're here is sensor dust. Sometimes when you shoot a picture, you'll get a spot of sensor dust on your frame and it messes up your picture and you want to get rid of it. But right now I'm not seeing any. But it could be there's some there that I'm not seeing. So what you do is with the spot removal tool selected, come down here, and this is tiny, I know, but it says visualize spots. So if I click the little dot, what it does is my picture looks like that. And anything that is a speck will show up as a speck. Now these things down here are probably gravel or dirt or something in the frame. And so this picture, I don't see any sensor dust. So, okay, we don't have to use it. We'll try it again on another picture. But for now, I don't see any, so I'm going to turn that back off. All right. How else might you use the spot removal tool? Well, Lightroom doesn't have very good cloning tools. Most cloning that you might want to do, you're going to have to go to Photoshop. But, you know, if you're creative, there are some things you can do with it. So look at this little post down here, this little metal post. I don't like that there. That is a distraction. So let's try a trick. We got the spot removal tool already selected. If I come over here, and if I want to make my removal tool bigger, I can either size it up with this, or I can roll the mouse wheel. Notice as I roll it, it can get bigger and it can get smaller. Let's make it really big now so you can kind of see. And what it's showing is the inner circle that's there is the size of the tool. The difference between the inner circle and the outer circle is what is called feather. And let me demonstrate what I mean. If I come to the feather over here, and let's take the feather down all the way, now there is no outer circle. The inner circle and the outer circle are almost the same. So the fall off between it being sharp and soft aren't very great. If I bring feather up all the way, now notice how big the feather is. Well, if we're going to use the spot removal tool to remove this post, we don't need a whole lot of feather, maybe a little bit. So I'm going to bring it down about like that. And I also don't need it this big, so I'm going to use the mouse wheel and roll this down to a size that's just a wee bit bigger than the post. Okay, stand by for the magic. Here's what we do. We take the tool and I put it towards the top of the post, and I wipe down to the bottom of the post and I let go. And what it does is it says, okay, I think a good place to sample from to cover the spot that you want to remove is right here. Now, sometimes Lightroom makes a good choice. I think here it probably did make a good choice. And I probably would be able to live with that. Let's talk about if it doesn't make a good choice. I'm going to move this to a place that wouldn't be a good choice. So I move it up to the barn. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to take what I see here and use that as my patch over here. And so I don't like that. So I'm going to move this to a place that I want it to sample from. say right here. And I'm seeing, if I look closely, a little bit of details and things. I don't like that either. So I don't like that. We're going to start all over again. So I'm going to hit delete on my keyboard, and that is going to go away, and my post is going to come back. Let's try it again, although we're going to try it with a slightly different trick since this is a vertical line. If I click the mouse here up above, I hold down Shift and I click at the bottom of the post, it's going to connect those two dots and make a straight line. And now I think that's going to work out pretty good. So I'm going to say done. And voila, the post is gone. Now if you were to zoom in there, you might see a little bit of detail. Again, I will point out that Lightroom does not excel at this type of work. Photoshop does a far better job. But, you know, sometimes it's enough to get the job done. Here, I would probably be happy with it. So we'll say that's okay. A couple of other things before we leave that tool. Let's go back and click the spot removal tool. And I want to come down here, a couple of other things. We know there's a tool here. We put it down here, but I can't see it. So down here where it says Tool Overlay, it says selected right now. I'm going to say, if I say Auto, notice when I get in the vicinity of the spot that I put down, it shows up. If I pick Always, these, and these are, by the way, called pins. That's the term that Lightroom refers to them. And you're going to see pins with a lot of the different tools. And what that's saying is this is where you used this tool. So that's what that is. Looking at the other things down here, I can say selected, and then it will only show the one that I'm working on at the time. Or I can say never, and I'll never see those. I typically leave this in either auto or always. So there's that. Okay, a couple other things we didn't talk about right now. Let's see if there's something else we can clone. Okay, we'll use this just as another example. I like this little thing down here, but let's make believe I didn't. So we'll clean him away. I remember what I said about sizing the tool. I can roll my mouse wheel and make it bigger or smaller. I can bring the feather up and down and change the amount of feather. Okay, this one down here we didn't talk about, opacity. And that is how much of the removal do I want it to do. 100% is everything. Somewhere less than that is less than that. And you're going to see, you know, some of it's still there. Here's something else to think about are these two tools. One's called Clone and one's called Heal. And let's use this guy down here to show you what the difference between the two is. Let's pick Clone. If I pick Clone and in fact, let's do it backwards just so you can better demonstrate it. Say I wanted to take something out here and I wipe over that spot. And it picks a sample, and instead of letting it sample where it thinks it is, I drag the thing from over to here. Now what it's done is it said clone from here to here. Okay, not something that you would very often do unless you want to replicate this several times. If I say, no, I don't want that, I can just hit the delete key, and that goes away, and so forth. Now, let's do clone on this thing, and you're still going to see that maybe it's not the best choice. If I come here and go over this little object, and it picks from another spot, let's pick from maybe here, notice what it did is it is cloning from here to this spot, and now I have something that doesn't look right. Sometimes if you want to make a duplicate of something, clone is the right tool, but more often than not, I find with the spot removal tool, you use Heal. So let's click it to Heal and you'll see what the difference is. And we're going to delete that and start over again. Let's go over this little spot down here. wipe him out, and let it go to heal. And it says, I'm going to pick from here and I'm going to use it for this spot. And you know, that might be okay. So we're going to say done. And again, it doesn't look bad. But, you know, I decided I want that post there. I don't want him to go away. So I'm going to click the tool again. Notice my pins show up. This one up here is where we took out the fence post. This one down here is where we just took out the other little post. So I'm going to hit delete, and now my post comes back. So that is the spot removal tool. This next tool is red eye correction. And obviously this picture is not going to have red eye. Red eye is something, you know what it is when you see it in people. Lightroom's red eye works very well. I don't have an example to show you tonight, but if you do have red eye, what you do is you use that tool, you drag a little box around where the eye is, and Lightroom makes it go away. And you will be surprised on how well it works. So if you need it, it's there. We can talk about it another time. This next one you use quite a bit. It's called the graduated filter tool. You have probably seen some people in the club using real graduated filters, and those are the glass things that, you know, start dark at the top and then fade to nothing, clear down towards the bottom. And what they're typically used for is to even up the brightness of the sky with the land. Well, say in this particular picture, I wanted the sky to be even a little darker maybe than it is, a little more moody or something like that. So let's show you how it might work. Well, real graduated filters, if you put one on and shot this picture with it, it would come down and let's go ahead and pick it first. It would come down and you'd start up here and it would be darker and it would get progressively lighter here. And if you wanted to darken the sky and you used a real graduated filter, yeah, it would darken the sky, but it would also darken the top part of the barn. Lightroom works around that, and I know there are people who have decided that they're not going to use real graduated filters anymore because they think Lightroom is more flexible. You'll get an argument on that one. It's kind of like saying, should you use a UV filter on your lens or not? That's kind of a holy war that goes on with those things, and the same that sometimes happens with graduated filters. But let's show you how it works. So anyway, you pick the graduated filter. We're going to graduate it from the top down. So I come up to the top. You'll notice my little X here. And as I drag it down, you can see what's happening. And what it does is based on how the sliders are set. Well, right now, if I look over here, the reason that it got darker from top to bottom is my exposure slider happened to be down a little bit. So let's talk about a couple of other things with sliders. Say you want to start out with everything zeroed. You don't want any effect at the time. What you can do is, if your sliders are set in different places, right now only this one, the exposure slider is set. In fact, let's make it more dramatic so you can see. Let's drag it way down. You'll notice what happened up here in the top of the sky. So now we say, no, that's not what we want. We want to have, start with 0. If I come over here to the word effect and I double click it, you'll notice what it's done is all my sliders are zeroed. So we start out at a 0 point, and that's pretty good. All right. Now let's talk about what I call, and I don't know if anybody else calls it this, but what I might call loading a tool. I can decide when I bring down the graduated filter, or I use a brush or whatever other tool I'm going to use. I pick the tool, and then like a painter might take and say, I'm going to load the brush with red paint, or I'm going to load it with, whatever. You can use the sliders, load the tool, and then cause the tool to apply the effects of those sliders. Let's see if I can explain what I mean here. I'm going to bring down the exposure slider. If the tool is selected at the time, as I begin to move the sliders, you will see see the effect. So I kind of like that. I like that it's darkening the sky. I may not want that much, so I'm going to back it off a little bit. I'm going to bring the effect of the tool down a little bit more. Now, what you're going to see is a couple things. These lines, what it's saying is I'm going to start here. I'm going to come to 50% in this distance, and I'm going to go from 50 to 0 in this distance. And I can choose where that happens. If I grab the little line at the bottom, I can make that different, or I can raise it up and down. The other thing I can do is if I grab the little dot in the middle, I can choose where that starts and ends. Or the other thing I can do is say I didn't necessarily want this straight across, I wanted it at a slight angle. Well, if I come over to the side here, you'll notice the cursor turns into kind of an up and down arrow. If I click and hold the button and drag, now you'll see my graduation rotates. So for this particular picture, we want to put it about here, and I'm going to bring it down to about where the horizon is, and I'm going to decide I don't want quite that much. We're going to back it off to where I kind of like it in the sky. And now let's let it do some other things. We don't not restricted to letting it just do exposure. We can have it do some other things. So let's bring up a little clarity. Notice what that's doing to clouds. I can bring up a little texture. I could, use it to do various things. Well, that's all fine and good, but I don't like what it's doing to the barn. I like what it's done to the sky, but not so much the barn. So there's some workarounds for that. And I'm going to take just a very slight intermission here and go grab something to drink. I didn't realize I was going to get dry doing all this talking. So hang tight a second, folks, and I will be right back. Stand by. And we'll be right back. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, back with you. Raise your hand if if you can hear me. Anyway, let's continue. So you saw as I was monkeying around there, an occasional flash of red right there. Notice if I rest my thing on there, it shows a red mask. What it's doing is showing where the filter is applied. Now, if I take it off, that disappears. Well, what if I want to leave it on so I can see what I'm doing? Down here, it says Show Selected Mask Overlay. If I check that box, now the mask stays on. So, it's showing it's on the sky, but it's also showing it's on the barn. Bruce Kilt says he got his scotch refilled. Bruce, I might need some. Anyway, so we want it on the sky, but we don't want it on the barn. So what do we do about that? Well, there's a couple things we can do about it. You'll notice if I come over here, it says mask, and a couple things, and it says brush. If I click the word brush, now I have a brush tool. You see it right there. And I can do various things with the brush. If I want more of the same effect that's going on up here, I can brush it. And I'm not going to do it right here. But say I don't want this on the barn. Well, now, and you'll notice in the little circle here, if you can see it there. Yeah, I think you can see it. I'll put it on the bar and maybe it shows up better there. Inside the brush is a plus. That says it's going to add to the mask. Oops. Hang on a second. People are saying I just saw the welcome screen. Hopefully it will come back, and you heard me say that I was taking a break. Also, I hope you're still hearing audio and you heard what I said. I needed a break so I could get a drink. So hang on. There's a 30-second delay here, so not to worry. I'm glad you're all hanging on there. You said, Rick, I think we lost you. You're cool. Everybody's freaking out here. Ah, no, we lost you. No, you didn't lose me. It'll come back. It'll come back. Hang on. Next time I'll make sure I have my drink handy before we get started. I'm out of practice here without radio practice. Hopefully it'll come back. It looks like we still have a stream. Oh, Patty says audio's on and not the rest. Okay, hang on. Let's see. Oh, I know what's going on. There we go. There we go. All right. That ought to fix it. My bad. My bad. Let me know when the picture comes back and we'll continue. It'll be back. Let me see if this comes through faster for you, chat. Okay, there we go. I think you're back. You never lost the audio, but you lost the video, and so you're good. All right. I can see. Everybody happy now? All right, good. Excellent. Cool. All right, let's pick up where we left off. Anyway, you'll see where the mask is, and what I was saying is if you don't want the mask on a certain area, notice right now in my little mask circle is a plus. If instead I hold down I think it's the Alt key. Alt key? I thought it was the Alt key. Shift key? Come on. Brush. Alt key. All right. Let's start that over again. Since we got all hosed up. Okay, turn that back on. There is my mask brush with the plus in it. Yes, the Alt key. Notice as I hold down the Alt key, the plus turns to a minus. And what that says is I'm going to take away the mask from where you paint with this. So let's make this a little bit smaller. Hold down the Alt key, and notice as I paint here, it's taking the mask off of the portions where I paint. So I can come down here all by the barn and take the mask off those portions by painting that back out. Still no video since my break. That's not good. All right, let me finish what I'm doing and then I will investigate. So there we go, and I'm going to let go, and I'm going to turn off the mask. And now what we should see, okay, it's fixed. so I'm told. So anyway, now we've kept the darkness on the sky, but we've taken the mask off the barn. There's the mask, only on the sky. There is what we've done. Now I look at that and I say, you know, I feel the sky's a little dark now. Well, now as we play with the sliders, we're only affecting where it's masked. So I can bring that back up just a scotch and, you know, liking that pretty well. So I'm going to say done. Let's see if there's anything else I didn't touch on here. Oh yes, the radial filter. As we used the, hang on a second here, no, we're good. All right, all looks good. People are happy. It says working for us. Excellent. So, the radial filter. What the radial filter does is sort of like the graduated filter, but in the shape of a circle. So let's talk about how that works. I'm going to click the radial filter, and notice my sliders are, well, not all of them, just the exposure slider is off. So the first thing I usually do when I pick a tool is I come to the effect, as I said, and I double click it, and then everything zeroes out. And then I decide what I want to do. Well, let's see how we might use the radial filter in this particular case. I still think maybe this area of the barn is a little darker than I would like it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag the radial filter, and you'll notice it makes either a circle or an oval, and as I drag the mouse around, I can change its shape. Let's leave it there, and I'm going to hit escape and, escape and, not escape. I'm going to hit delete and make it go away. Say I wanted, for whatever reason, the radial filter to be perfectly round. As I hold down the shift key, you'll notice as I drag, now it stays a perfect circle. Okay? I don't need that for this, but let's show you what else we can do. Say it starts as a perfect circle. Notice these little handles all around the edge. If I grab a handle, I can change its shape. So let's put it right here. And also, if I go to the outside of the thing, you'll notice I get my double-headed arrow. I can click, hold, and drag, and I can rotate that and make it whatever shape I want. And you're going to say, all right, well, that's all swell, but why would you do that there? Hang on. We're getting there. Notice the red circle. That's where it would affect right now. Now, all these tools, like the other brush tool, have some other controls for them. And if I drag down here, it says, okay, this tool, you have that amount of feather. But if I drag the feather way up, notice when I hold over the thing, notice how the edges are much softer now, where the mask is. The other thing that you can do is you can choose to have this effect inside the circle or outside the circle. Right now, because this is turned to invert, and that's because that's how it was last time I used it, it's affecting the inside of the circle. If I change it to invert, and now I hold my thing over the thing, it's saying, okay, I'm going to affect everything outside the circle, which in this case is most of the picture. For this purpose, I want it inside the circle, so I'm going to change it to invert. Okay, now how do I want to use this? Well, say I want to dodge this area of the barn because I decided it was a little too dark. So I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to take my exposure slider and drag it up a little bit, and you'll notice where it lightens that area of the barn. And I can change the shape and so forth, and I can change the feather and how I like. And I say, yeah, that's a little too much. Let's back that off just a taste, and so forth. And what I've done is dodged that area of the barn, kind of put a little highlight on it. Well, I might say, well, that's nice, and maybe I'd like to do it over here too. Well, I could make another one, or I could click in the middle, hold down Shift, I think it was. Shift. Oh, I'm sorry. Right click. Okay, there we go. Right click in the middle, pick duplicate, and now when I let go, come on, baby. There we go. You're going to notice it's doubly bright because I have two stacked on top of one another. So let's take the one, drag it over here where we say it's a little dark over here too. But it's getting up on the snow. Well, I don't want that. Let's change its shape. Let's rotate this around a little bit. We can move it where we want. So what I can do is essentially make little spots of light, if you will, and use them, drag, drop, put them where I want to highlight certain areas. Serge Ramelli is the one who taught me this, and he calls it complexifying the light. That's kind of his term, which is maybe just a fancy way of saying dodging and burning. That's what he's doing. Anyway, so that's how you might use that tool. So we'll say done with that. All right, I could keep playing with this one, but maybe we'll look at a different picture so you can learn some other things. How we're looking good on time. It's coming up my time about 7:56 right now as I throw this out to you. So I think for the purposes of this class, I'm not going to last. We normally do these workshops from 7 to 9:30 or thereabouts. I think we'll try and go 7 to 8:30 or so forth would be about right. So we'll see. All right, so how'd we do? Let's use the before and after. So remember I said when we started, if you hold down the backslash key, you can see the before and after. Well, obviously we just worked on this, so this is our after. But if I hold down the backslash key, there's our before. So that's where we started. Before we did all this, notice the little metal post is there because it was there when we started. And now if I let the backslash key go, that's our after. So did we make a pretty good change? I think the moral of the story is for those of you who are starting with images that look like this right out of the camera, don't dismay. A raw picture typically is not going to look real good right out of the camera. You're going to need to do some work on it. So again, if you start out with an image like this, you can wind up with an image like this with a little work. Now, I don't think this is stellar. I don't think the club would give me a 9 on this, but, it's better. So let's look at some other things. We'll come over, and since he's such a cute little guy, let's come over to my grandson. Or no, not Mark. Mark is my son. This is my grandson. This is William. And this was taken a few years ago. And what I really liked about this picture is most of you know the story of Linus waiting for the great pumpkin in the pumpkin patch. And obviously we couldn't instruct him and give him directions to do this, but he just happened to look up probably at mom or dad, and I snapped the shot, and man, this is Linus in the pumpkin patch if you ever saw him. So this is the after. Let's show you the before, and then we're going to show you what we had to do. Okay, that's the before. The lighting was lousy this day. We put him in the shade so that we didn't get the harsh shadows on him, but I still had the bright sun in the background. The exposure isn't great. We got some weird piece of the pumpkin stem sticking out there. Catching that bright light, it needs some help. So let's see what we can do and how we did it. We wound up here after I got all done. So let's do a reset, and we're going to start from scratch. So let's see. I'm not going to spend quite as much time on each tool here because we showed them to you, and hopefully you'll say, oh, okay, that's how he uses it. So let me have a short slurp here and we'll keep going. All right. So starting at the beginning, remember I said always give auto a try. So we're going to click auto. Boom, that helps a bit right from the get-go. And you can see what it did with my sliders. So back to where we went. I missed one last time, and let's talk about it real quick. White balance. Most of you know what white balance is. One of the beauties of shooting in RAW is you don't have to pay so much attention to white balance because you can adjust it after the fact. And that is a real power for RAW, especially when you're shooting in mixed light conditions. This light is all daylight, so not a big deal here, but say you shoot in an auditorium or you shoot an area where there are tungsten lamps and window light coming in and all your light is of different colors and so forth. You might have a white balance problem. So let's talk about a couple of ways to deal with white balance. This may not be the best example, but you'll get the idea. You'll notice I have two white balance sliders. That's what WB stands for. And at the moment, it's showing me, okay, my white balance is as it was shot. Well, I can either pick some defaults or I can do it on my own. We'll talk about the defaults. If I click as shot, I have auto. Yeah, he looks a little blue to me in that shot. I have daylight. That looks pretty good. That's warmed it up quite a bit, and this was daylight, so that might be a pretty good match. I have cloudy. That warms it up even more, I think too much. I have shade, which warms it up even a little more. That's certainly too much. I have tungsten, which obviously is not going to make it very nice. Tungsten is exactly what it says, shot under tungsten lights. So if you had done that, the picture would be yellow for starters. You use this to cool the warmness. We don't want that. Fluorescent lights are typically green, so it throws in more magenta to compensate. Don't want that. Flash. We didn't shoot this under flash. That looks a little too green. Or custom. All right. Custom means I'm going to do this on my own. So there are various ways to adjust the white balance. We can go to temp. You'll notice it's blue on this side and it's yellow over on this side. And as I drag this back and forth, I am changing. Let's drag it all the way this way. The image becomes very blue. As I drag it over this way, the image gets warmer. So I can eyeball it and say, I like it about there. Actually, I liked it better when we had it on up here. As I look through these, I think it was daylight that I liked. So let's go back to daylight, and then that can become a starting point, and I can tweak these very slightly myself. Now, something else about sliders to know. If I move the slider here, it moves it in a greater degree of adjustment than if I come over with the cursor and I put my cursor on this number and I notice this becomes like a little scrubby, and I can drag it, and now it does it in very fine. You probably won't even be able to see that on the screen, but in much finer degrees of change than I can do by simply moving the slider here. Okay, so say I like that pretty well, but it still looks a little green to me maybe. And on a portrait, I'm most concerned about skin tones. So if the skin tones look a little green to me, well, the tint slider adjusts between green and magenta. So let's bring a little more magenta into that. Not a lot. If I go over here, he turns purple. If I go over here, he becomes a alien. But let's put that where that feels about right. And I like that. Okay. That's one way we can do it, doing all those things. Notice over here, we have this little tool, which is an eyedropper. And if I hover it, it says white balance selector. What I can do is use the dropper and pick an area of the photo that I feel should be neutral gray or neutral white or so forth, and it will use that area to adjust the white balance for the rest of the image. Well, he happens to be wearing this sweater that has these little white checks in it. So let's pick up the eyedropper and sample from right here. Okay. Don't like what it did. So how do I make it get back to where it was? What's the undo key? Control Z. I like where I tweaked it better. Sometimes the eyedropper will work. Sometimes you'll have to do it on your own. So I'm pretty happy with the white balance, but we've got some more work to do. I think the exposure should come up a little bit. Contrast, we'll play with that a little bit. I kind of like that. Remember what I said about highlights and shadows? Sometimes I drag the highlights all the way down and the shadows all the way up. And if I don't like that, then I tweak them back a little bit. We'll set our white point, Alt, click, drag till I see just some highlights, let go, blacks, click, hold till I see a few blacks. Okay, that looks better, like that. All right, so we're getting there. Let's talk about a few other things we can do. William has the greatest blue eyes, so let's make those even nicer looking. If I click here, notice this is a plus. I can zoom in. I can click and hold and drag. Notice over here, I also have my zoom. Fit means fit the picture into the screen. Fill means fill the entire screen with the picture. 1:1 comes in farther. This last one is 4:1. You can set it to various things. 4:1 is pretty intense. I don't want that. But, you know, we're going to work on his eyes, so maybe something like that. So when I get in tight to his face, I notice he had a couple little owies on his nose. Remember the spot removal tool? We click that. We make it smaller. I'm rolling the mouse wheel to do this to make it smaller. I click here, and it picks a spot, and I click here, and it removes a spot, and we took care of those little things. I see a spot up here. I see a spot here. I see something here. I see maybe a little something here. And notice it's picking its sample spots. As long as I'm happy with those, I'd leave them. If I said, no, don't sample from there, I like it better from here, for instance, I move it. So we'll say we're done with that tool. Okay, we came in here to work on his eyes. So let's show you how you might do that. We'll go to the brush tool. All right. Got all our sliders. Let's double click and zero them. Okay, notice this little spot. It says exposure at the moment, but if I click it, I get all kinds of other options. One of the options is called Iris Enhance. So let's click that because we're going to make his eyes a little bluer. I'm going to roll down my, the mouse wheel to make this a little smaller. And I'm going to turn on the mask overlay so I can see where I'm working. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to paint that little area of his eye. And you're going to say, why are you painting his eye red? You make him look like a devil child. And he's not. He's the sweetest little guy. I'm kind of partial. So forth. Now I goofed up. I got a little down here. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key. And I'm going to brush that back out. Okay, going to turn off the mask. All right, notice his eyes, how they got a little bluer. And you can see where the sliders went. When you work on eyes, be careful to not get crazy because you can make them look very strange. For instance, I could say, well, let's bring up the exposure a little bit. Well, that's not a good look either. We don't want that. So just, be subtle. Be a little more maybe than what you had. Can bring down saturation just a little bit. And so I like that. That works pretty good. So I'm going to say done. And there we go. So let's go back out. Fit. All right. Now, bigger problem. What to do up here? Okay. I could use the gradient that we used. In this case, I think I'm going to use the adjustment brush. So I'm going to pick the brush. I'm going to come here and turn this to exposure. I'm going to load the brush with a little less exposure. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to paint this area down because I want that darker. Okay. To my eye, it made that kind of brownish. So a couple ways we might deal with that. I could take and bring down the color maybe a little bit. That's not bad. So forth. So we'll call that good. I don't want to get hung up on this and so forth. So I'm going to say done on that. Still got one little problem. I don't like this little thing here. So let's come in here and see what we can do. I'm going to grab the spot removal tool. Roll up the wheel to make it a little bigger. Paint over where I want to remove. I'll get to this other piece in a minute. Let go. That's not bad. We'll come in here, paint over this area. That's not great, but it's better. Again, lesson learned here. Lightroom, this is not where it excels. It's okay, but it's not great. Let's get rid of this funny looking thing down here too if we can. Fortunately, these things are not very big in the picture. So if they're better, they'll be pretty small. We'll just say done. I don't want to get hung up. I mean, some of this other stuff, you can see the gradation here isn't great and so forth. If you were really getting serious, you would go to Photoshop to do this. But not bad. Okay, are we done? Almost. One other thing that you hear us talk about a lot in the club are vignettes. What vignettes do is slightly darken the corners to make the focus of the photo more on the subject. Here in Photoshop, we do that down here in Effects. Click here, and we have post-crop vignetting. If I bring this down just a little bit, notice it darkens the corners. These other sliders, I'm not going to get into a whole lot. They change the shape, the size, the amount of feather, and so forth of your crop. For instance, if I turn down feather all the way, you'll see I have a hard edge. If I turn it up, I begin to soften the edges of the vignette. Some people, for some photos, like what is called a reverse vignette. I'm not a fan. Usually, I've used it on some pictures. But if I take it this other direction, then my vignette becomes white rather than black. So, you know, whatever you want for your particular picture. You want a vignette to not call a lot of attention to itself. It should be just subtle, but the purpose is the eye will always go to the brightest portions of a photo. And so by darkening the corners and leaving the center area light, you make the attention go towards the subject, which is what you want. So let's show the before and after. Then I think what I'm going to do is, I don't think we're going to maybe get to some of the rest of these pictures. Like I say, I'd like to wrap this up at about 8:30 because my voice will give out by about that time. So I am going to show you the before and after, and then I'm going to scroll back and see if I can see what some of you have been talking about. If you have other questions and so forth, start posting those now, and with the delay, we should see them, and maybe I can get to them, or you can say, show me this, show me that. I know earlier Dale to Wheel wrote and said, talk about presets. So I may be able to talk about those very briefly. That might, if we get into them in depth, you might we can show them a little more, but I can do a quick and dirty on them. In fact, we can do it with this picture, and you can at least get an idea what a preset is and what it does. Let's do the before and after. This is the after. This is the before. Big difference, huge difference on that one. I'm pretty happy with that. So, but I'm partial to this kid anyway, so, you know, there's that too. Okay, let's leave this up on the screen for the moment, and let me see if I can read some of your questions and do some of what you're talking about. I'm going to scroll back up. I can see where you all freaked out when the screen went away. I'm pleased you were enjoying it. Looking through, okay, I'm back quite a ways. Let's scroll down and see if I can see any other questions. If I don't speak to your question, type it again. But I'm going to start talking to them now, so hopefully I will get to you. I see a lot of comments, but not a lot of questions. Patty Sharp says, did you know you can see both before and after screens by hitting the YY boxes on the bottom of the screen? Let's show you what she's talking about. Down here, you'll notice this box. If I hit that, then I can see the before and the after right next to each other. I can change, you know, flip-flop the order, so forth and so on. So that's how that works. That's what this is right here, the before and after. I can also do a split screen. So if I make it look like this, I can drag, I can hopefully, oh no, I guess I thought you could drag that back and forth, but I guess you can't. You can just kind of see the split screen without dragging it. Yeah. If you can drag that, that might be a trick that I don't know yet. I can do that and stack before and after, over, under, or that, or so forth. Or I can, oh, this would be if I wanted to compare a different photo. I don't use these a whole lot, but, you know, they're good. Okay, this one gets you back to your main screen, what's called the loop view. So that's what that is. I'm seeing a few more questions come in. Terry says you would think that Lightroom would have the same cloning ability that Photoshop has because it's the same company, Adobe. No, because they operate totally different. Lightroom, by its very nature, is what's called a non-destructive editor. I have, where was I going with that? Non-destructive editor. When you work on your raw file, everything that I've done to these files is basically instructions that have been added as a little sidecar file that Lightroom references. The original raw has not been changed. So I'll give you a good example, and maybe we can also build into Dale's question earlier about presets. Let's come over to presets and see what they are. Basically, presets are a recipe. In essence, what they're saying is I'm going to save some information in a set of instructions so that when you click this preset, it adjusts your sliders for you to do what you've asked for. So for instance, say I wanted to make this a monochrome picture. Well, I could do it manually over in the sliders, or I could come to a black and white preset and let it do it for me. So for instance, people sell presets all the time. It seems to be a thing that's popular. I think it's because it's easy to make them, and if you sell them, it's easy money. I use them occasionally. I'm not a big fan, and here's why. It's because presets are essentially one-click editing. And if you say, okay, I'm going to use the preset, then you're not learning anything. You're not doing it yourself. You're just saying, apply this to the photo. Now, the upside is if you really like the look it gives to the photo, great, one click, you get there, and you still can tweak it after the fact. So let's give you an example of what I was talking about. Here's one called Cole's Starter Pack. I think this was a freebie I downloaded somewhere, and it came with a bunch of presets. Didn't pay for this one. So he's got all these, and it's called Antiqued and Big Bold Color and Bitchin' Summer and all these types of things. Well, you notice as I hover them, it shows what it's going to do the picture. Well, okay, I'm on Bitchin' Summer right now, and some people might go, I kind of like that. It looks kind of retro. All right, well, if I want that, I can click that, and bingo. What it's done is it's gone into all my sliders, and it's made adjustments to them using the preset. It's probably gone into some of these others. It may have even gone into this calibration setting, which I'm not going to get into calibration right now, but, you know, that's what it is. Now, if I say, well, that's nice, but I don't really like that, Control Z, and bam, I'm back. So the fact that I talked about a non-destructive editor, because Lightroom is simply tagging your original RAW file with a set of instructions, at any time you can get back to the original, or you can even step back through some things, if that makes sense. Now, talking about stepping back through some things, let's see, okay. Trying to remember where it is. I think it's actually in the library module. I'm looking for history. Let's see if I can get there. No, I don't use it a lot, so I have to stop and think of, oh, okay. Collapse presets. Okay, here it is. History. If I open that up, see all these things? These are all the steps that we did when we were editing this photo. Every single step, and I can come to any point in this history and go to where we did. So you'll notice, okay, down here, we hadn't darkened the background. And as we come up, you see what we did and so forth. So I can go to any point in my history and go to that point. And the reason I'm able to do this is, again, these are simply instructions that have been added on top of the RAW file to change it. So, now, let's look at questions again. I can think of 2 or 3 other things to talk about, but I'd rather try and answer your questions. Let's see. Frank says, can you show how you set the black and white points again with the shadows all the way up? Let's see if I understand what you're asking. Shadows, oh, okay. We'll go to basic. We'll turn the shadows all the way up in this particular picture, and setting the black and white points. Okay, to set the white point, what you do is put your, here, actually there's 2 ways, and I'm going to show them both to you. You can put your cursor on the slider, hold down the Alt key, click and drag. And as I drag to the right, the farther I drag, anything that starts showing white like that, or even you're starting to see some blue and those colors, those things are 100% white. If I was to leave that there, that's what he would look like. Don't like that. So let's hold that down, bring it back, and on whites, you only usually want to see maybe the very brightest point, if at all, because what it's saying is right now where that blue speck is almost 100% white, right there. and that's okay. Same with blacks. Hold down the Alt key, click and drag until I start seeing some areas, and those are 100% black. Typically, you can live with a little more black spots, dark areas, than you can with white spots. Depends on the picture. So what you do is let go, and then since you can now see the picture, you can then fine-tune the slider manually a little bit more. I actually, for this picture, don't want as much as what we got before. That's one way to do it. Let's completely mess these up so you can see. Yeah, I'll go the other way. I think there we go. Okay. Say I want to automatically set the black and white point. If I hold down the Shift key, double click on the word whites, oh, there we go, and then double click on the word blacks, it automatically picks the white and black point. And what do I mean by white and black point? The whitest thing in the scene and the blackest thing in the scene. The blackest thing in the scene is going to be whatever is right there on the histogram, and the whitest thing in the scene is going to be whatever right to the far right in the histogram. So hopefully, Frank, that described what you want. Christine says, will this presentation be saved anywhere so you can review it again? Yes. If I make it work. I'm still learning, but in theory, this should be saved. This should be saved in the same area on my channel, which everybody who you watch on YouTube says, be sure to like and subscribe. Well, go ahead and like and subscribe. At least you'll be able to come back, and then you'll be able to come here and see anything new that I add and review this whole tutorial that we did tonight. Robert says, can you show how to work from a virtual copy so you can make different edits? Yes, indeed. One of my favorite things to do. Say I want both a color and a monochrome version of this photo. Well, I could do the color version, print it, do whatever, and I could do the monochrome version and do whatever. But say I want one of each. Well, I can make what's called a virtual copy. And a virtual copy, what it is it simply, it's the same photo, it's the same raw photo, but with a different set of instructions. And it's the photo that takes up the room. It's not the instructions. That's just a text file. So what do we do, and how do we do it? What we do is, I can do it probably right here on this screen. If I right click, you'll notice down here it says create virtual copy. So I'm going to click that, and okay, there we go. Now down here in the film strip, you'll see I have 2 copies of the picture. I don't have 2 files on the drive. I just have 2 versions of the same picture. So say I'm going to leave this one color, but I want to come to this one and make it black and white. So let's come back here. I'll show you very quickly how to do black and white on your own rather than use a preset. And then I think we're going to start winding it up. So I can come right over here and say, make that one black and white. So now there's my black and white. There's my color, because I have, hello. Doesn't want to switch back to my other one. All right, it should in a minute. Anyway, this one hasn't refreshed. No worries. Okay, now something very quick, and then we're going to wind it up. I don't see any more questions. I hope we are still live. I don't see any more comments in the chat. If you're still out there, folks, send me another message to give me a heads up we're still live. Anyway, I know what I was going to show you. So we'll go to the black and white version. Now it's switching. There we go. Okay, I'm going to collapse this down. You'll notice now I have a thing called black and white. If I use this, then here are all of my various colors that are comprised in the picture. Well, this picture had a lot of orange in it, and we'll use that as an example. So say I darken the orange, what's going to happen? Notice how his hat gets much darker and the pumpkin gets darker, but his face didn't change. Okay, that's one way to do it. Say all this green that was in the photo initially, I wanted to lighten. I could grab the green slider and I could bring that up. Notice the foliage is getting lighter, but not the rest of the picture. Okay, but how do I know what's what color, or what it calls green and what it calls? This little guy is called the targeted adjustment tool. If I click him and then I rest it on a portion of the picture, it's going to pick whatever color, and you're not seeing color, but it knows what it is, that's under the picture. And I click and hold and drag. Now I'm darkening the orange because that was the orange in his hat. Or if I click down here, maybe on one of the leaves, notice it's moving the green portion of the image. Now you can use this same targeted adjustment tool in the color version too. We'll come back to this. Say I decide that his hat is a little too orange, or I don't like the shade of orange that it is. I can click the targeted adjustment tool, put it on the orange, and say, bring that orange down just a little bit. Notice now everything that was orange in the photo is getting darker. Now he's got a little bit of orange color in his skin, so it's changed there too. Remember what I said about getting things back? If you say, oh man, I hosed that up, I can double click a slider and it zeroes it. So that's what that does. Anyway, let's see if there's any other quick questions, and we're going to wind it up. I appreciate the kudos, folks. Crazy that we have to do it this way, but one of the advantages is you can go back and review this, hopefully. So we're developing online tutorials as we go. Giuseppe says then you drag the histogram to the right. I'm not sure. You can adjust from the histogram. I mean, you can come up here and actually drag on the histogram and then change the picture. Notice if I do that, it's not a way that I usually work, but you can. Command E will hand off to Photoshop and return. Yeah, we're not going to talk about jump into Photoshop tonight. That's a whole nother gig. But yes, so you noticed where I sent that picture out earlier so that I worked on the stem and I said it wasn't very good. I could say, okay, export this to Photoshop. Let me work on it there and then kick it back into Lightroom. That's called round tripping, and we will talk about that another time. Okay, I don't see any other questions. I may have missed somebody. Feel free to go out to the BCC Facebook page and leave comments there. I think you can leave comments here on this video. I sure appreciate you folks coming out tonight. This has been excellent. I'm learning some new tricks, and who knows, maybe I'll do more of these. So thanks for joining me tonight. I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. Let's see if I can get back to those. So thanks for joining us. And as I said, the workshop has been recorded. It's available for replay on my YouTube channel. And you'd come in via the same link as the way you got here tonight. So there's that. And I have one final thing to leave you with. For now, you're just going to have to be like this little piggy. And if you remember the nursery rhyme, you'll figure it out. You'll know what I'm talking about. So take care. Be well. I hope to see you live rather than virtual in the future. But if we have to do this for a while, so be it. I'm sure glad you could join me tonight. So we're going to